Hi everyone, I'm Shilpa. I'm a speech language therapist and assistant director in Stepping Stone Center. Uh, Welcome everyone to our episode 4. And we are today, we all work in towards early intervention. But have you ever thought what exactly should we be um, aiming to gain in post-early intervention program is done? We also work on social skill codes. So when we say social skill groups, social skill therapy, what exactly are we looking at achieving? Let's hear it from today's guest. Our guest today is Heather Hackett-Hayes. She has been a board certified behavior analyst, a BCBA, since 2008, and has been working with autism in the field of autism for 30 years. And she's practicing in state of Georgia. Heather completed her BCBA coursework at University of Northern Texas and pursuing doctorate program at Arizona State University in integrated behavioral health. Heather has served children and adults with developmental disabilities and has been recognized for her dedication to ABA and advocacy efforts to improve educational and vocational opportunities for young adults on spectrum in various environments, including schools, clinics, home based programs, and group homes. She served clients in Canada, the USA, and England and India. So we welcome Heather today. Hi, Heather. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's so nice to have you today in this episode. I'm just going to go into the questions so that I don't take much time. And
Sure.
so
Well, thank you for having me. I always love collaborating with you guys.
you have been always so sweet in helping. So we will go to the questions. So
Sure.
I'm sure our audiences want to hear all about your experiences. So, what are some common misconceptions surrounding autism spectrum disorders? And how do you address and correct those misunderstandings?
So, a couple of the biggest things, I think some of the misconceptions about autism are that autistic children or adults um, are not social. They don't want to be social. They don't want to have friends. Um, that's probably one of the biggest things. And really, from working with, people on the spectrum from across all ages and being able to talk to them and even be with them. I mean, I've had clients for 15 years, so you see them grow and learn over that time.
Oh,
But
long
they have said
time.
to me they want to be social, they want friends, but they don't know how to do it, and they don't know the value of that social relationship. So that's probably one of the biggest misconceptions is that they, want to be by themselves and they don't want friends and they don't want to be part of kind of a community. So that's probably one of the biggest things. I think another misconception is that, especially younger children with autism, have a lot of sensory needs and issues and don't like loud noises and don't like bright lights. Certainly, a lot of them do. Um, but some
It's
of them
not the
are able
same for
to,
everyone. Yeah.
yeah, and they're able to curb that a little bit. Um, and so oftentimes people are afraid to either approach them or they'll say, oh, if we play music, they'll get upset or if there's a loud noise. So that's kind of a misconception. Not every single child with autism has that kind of reaction to different, noises and sensory things. Um, Probably another misconception um, is that parents and caregivers are not a misconception, I guess, but people assume that parents and caregivers are kind of the expert on their child, which they are, and they're the most knowledgeable, but they don't know everything. So it is a big misconception when a parent or a caregiver or someone who's working with a child or an adult with autism, they think that they're the expert and they should be able to fix everything and everything should be fine. It's a work in progress all the time. So, so that's probably one of the biggest things is that, you know, everyone, and especially the child or the adult with autism, is still working on things all the time. So that's kind of a misconception that you get to like an end point and everything should be okay. Um, I guess kind of how we combat that is that we, especially now, when I first started in the field, parent training was not a huge thing. You know, it was our job to work with children and adults with autism and not the parents or the caregivers. So to combat that is that we do more parent training. We're giving them the tools, we're giving them the confidence to be able to implement things with their children, but then also to expand their independence in life. So
Yes,
parent training is one of the biggest things of kind of combating
very,
these
very
misconceptions.
important. Yeah.
Yes. And then another thing, even the past few years, I've really tried to focus on educating the community. So we talk about autism awareness and people being more aware. Yes, that's what we have to focus on to kind of combat some of these misconceptions about autism, but not just the general public and just knowing general things about autism and what it is and how to recognize it and then to be compassionate about it. We have really um, we've really made an effort to empower the community more by training police officers, um,
Wow.
how to react to a situation if they go to a house or if there's a child missing, you know, with autism, how to work with that family really well and to be empathetic. I've even gone and spoken at our state bar. So I've talked to lawyers who are working with people with developmental disabilities, or, you know, a lot of people with autism get arrested and they don't know how to work with them or their families. So just bringing more specific awareness to our community helpers because they're supposed to be helping
That's so, so
our kids and our.
important. It's so, so
Mhm.
important.
So
I think
they're
that
more
is,
aware.
I'm so sorry. I was just saying that
No.
that's very important. And, I think we are missing that here in India, wherein we are still in a stage wherein we are educating our, parents and teachers and more education system. We've not yet reached that part wherein we have to educate the community. Just that we were some days back, I was meeting a friend, and she was telling when she was back in, I think from the United States itself. So she went for a driving test, and there was a child there was an individual with on spectrum who was having a meltdown, and everyone just were calm. No one was really looking at him and making him more um feeling bad, or more noticed. They just made him gave him place to calm down and then come back and give the test again. Now that when I heard, I was like, wow, that is where we as a community we have to reach, where we accept the individual so
Mhm.
well, right? And you're doing a great
Yeah.
job.
Trying, but that's how, you know, we can kind of curb those misconceptions about autism for sure.
Yes. Thank you. So, as someone with an expertise in behavioral analysis and special education as well, so how do you approach supporting individuals with autism and spectrum in the unique behavioral and educational needs, like as both sides, if you could speak?
Sure. I think the biggest thing is to not only work with the child or the student at their present level, but you have to always be thinking ahead. So, a bigger part of all of our treatment plans and IEPs for schools is thinking that next step, where they're going next. So, it's not just, like I said, the present and what they're doing right now, but how do we scaffold those skills together to get where they want to be, you know, that end result. And by that, it means you have to work with the family and the caregivers, and you're taking their opinions and their wants and needs for their specific family um, into account when you're doing treatment planning. Um, Also, you know, it's about teaching the educators um, and giving them those skills to feel confident in writing an individualized plan. You know, I see a lot of times, you know, as a BCBA and then as a school administrator, um, you know, every kid had an individualized education plan, but they were very similar. So there would be, 5 or 6 kids in a class, and the plans would be very similar because the kids were kind of similar, and they were in a class because they had, similar levels. But their plans were the same, and it didn't take into account how those things were going to affect that child in their community as well. So even though you're in a school setting, you have to think about that child and what skills they need to be in soccer or at the grocery store, or how they're going to be functional outside of the school as well.
Um, as an educator, when you say that they have like IEP, right? So you're looking into
Yes.
an inclusive setup you're talking about. So, so all the I'm just curious. So the teachers
Yep.
there, they actually, come forward to learn the skill to put in, or to make an IEP, because here, as we see, the inclusion part is more of like a specialist would be there who helps to make an IEP, and the teacher just follows.
hmm Yeah. More and more, obviously we're collaborating with schools. So the school team would consist of the home-based therapists and the school-based therapists to work together so that they're working on similar techniques,
Yes.
similar prompting strategies, using similar phrases, things like that. But the teachers are very much, wanting to learn more specifics about ABA and how to implement it as well, which is obviously wonderfully helpful for generalizing skills and maintaining skills. Um, but also, you have to target what's that child and that family really, really needs. So it's not just what every single, third grader needs to know. It's also where that child is at right now and where they're going to be next year. So it's really looking at how to scaffold them to get to where they need to be.
Yes. Okay. So, could you discuss the significance of early intervention of individuals who are in spectrum? And,
Yes.
if you can also put a light on some kind of techniques in early intervention, which you would, want to, which you feel that has proven successful in your practice.
Sure. Sure. So, yes, early intervention is kind of key to long successes and long-term, behavior change. When we see children who are a bit older, it is definitely more difficult to, redirect problematic behaviors and teach some skills just because um, they've already created patterns of behavior,
Yes.
right? So it's really difficult to kind of to backtrack on that. So of course, early intervention is key. That doesn't necessarily mean though that if a child starts getting intervention later that they're not going to benefit from it. They definitely will. But obviously, early intervention is key, especially for evoking language. Language and communication, of course, is huge. So if we get to work on that at a younger age, obviously more, it's just going to exponentially help the individual with autism um, to be able to communicate, to be able to participate more in their community and in their world. Um, Also, some of the specific things, again, I'm going to talk about parent training again. That was definitely something that was not part of our early intervention services. Um, you know, 20 years ago, we would start ABA with, 40 hours a week, and that's what we did. We worked directly with the child. And now it's very different. It's individualized, the hours are catered to the child, what their normal schedule is, but we are focusing on parent training. So training parents from an early age with their children to ignore certain behaviors and reinforce other behaviors. That is, I mean, differential reinforcement is probably the best thing that you can teach a parent of an early intervention student. So teaching them those techniques is super, super important. And also, again, I know that listening to the professionals, around you who are working with your child, of course, is important for early intervention, um, but also challenging them. I've also seen where there's been some early intervention and, a child has been in early intervention for 3 years and they haven't figured out a communication system for the child yet. So we want parents to be educated to say, no, we need to push the envelope a little bit more. We need to get more out of these services. And It could be vocal language, it could be using a device, whatever it is, you have to have a communication system. You can't really work on increasing adaptive skills and reducing maladaptive behaviors unless you have communication and a rapport with that student. So, early intervention, the key thing is teaching a communication system and parent training, definitely on the basics of reinforcement and how to kind of figure out some of the functions of the behavior for the parents.
Definitely. I think that still needs to be worked upon in case, like, wherein parents find it very difficult to accept that the verbal language may not work out in some children because they have a different way of communication. They could be, uh, they could be gestalt users. I mean, just as an SLP, I'm saying that there could be so many other way of communication they could see, right? But the parents here are finding it very difficult to accept at that particular age that, under three and all, under 3 years of age, 4 years of age, that, they would be giving up on verbal language and going into an alternative communication or an augmentative communication. So it's very important to make them understand that that will go hand in hand. It's not like you're leaving the verbal communication altogether, but then it has going to go hand in hand. And I think that is this what you mentioned, a very important point, that the communication system has to be in place by the time the early intervention is completing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So can you share a particularly impactful moment of a success story of in which you would have worked with an individual on spectrum during this many years of practice?
Absolutely. So I always like to focus on developing social skills, no matter the language or cognitive ability of the student that I'm working with. So I did work one summer with a teenager on the spectrum, and he basically changed the way I interacted with my clients
Wow.
because we worked all summer and his parents wanted him, by the time he went back to school, they wanted him to really be well versed in kind of the nuances of talking to other people because he was very blunt. He would say, exactly what was on the top of his tongue. And he always had a really difficult time at school because of that. Also, they were very worried about his hygiene and how he looked to others. So, they would say if you look disheveled and your hair is not clean, you have food on your shirt and on your face, people aren't going to want to talk to you. And he really, really wanted friends. So all summer, we had all of this programming in place, all of these task analysis, everything set up. He was combing his hair, checking it out, making sure his clothes were right and
Wow.
clean. He knew exactly what to say, how to react to people. We practiced and practiced, role played. We did everything all summer. And the first day of school, they allowed me to go with him. So I was kind of in the background, just kind of seeing how he was doing and, if he needed a little break or something. And he did great. He sat in the classroom and he wasn't really trying to be social, which he usually is. And he's just he was inappropriate. So at the end of the day, I said, you weren't really trying to talk. You weren't trying to, be like them. And now you've got this new look and you're all, you're fitting in. And he goes, Miss Heather, it was hard all day to keep it in. So he was really
Oh
working
my
on keeping
God.
it in so hard, and he felt like he couldn't be himself. And then I kind of got a little frustrated. I said, all of the stuff that we worked on all summer, and you did so great, and you didn't do any of the things. And I'm like, just look around, look just like everyone else. You kind of you fit in. And he goes, but Miss Heather, they're just not like me.
Wow.
And that was a moment when I said, wow, we are trying to get you to look like everyone else. And he goes, mm-mm, they all have something up with them. They need to be more like me. And I thought, wow, we're doing this from the wrong perspective. He's not internally motivated to do this. So we kind of switched our way of kind of interacting with him. And for every other client that I've worked with since, I have to think about from their perspective what's going to work, what is going to be socially appropriate and not ostracize them, but also from their perspective, not from what we want them to do or what we think they should look like. And that young man's name is Nicholas, and now he is a computer genius, and he has a close-knit, circle of friends, and he's very successful and he's wonderful. But it really made me change my perspective.
That's
He's amazing, and I still talk to him. And this
oh,
was
wow.
20 years ago.
It does make us think on, we have to look at from the other perspective. That's what we all speak about in neurodiversity and firming, correct? Um,
Absolutely.
yes. So that's very nice of you to share this with our audiences. I'm sure all the therapists who are watching this would be right now thinking about that particular child who has made them think this. Every one of us would have actually come across, but sometimes you were open to that thought. You didn't make him understand otherwise and try to again change it. You were actually open to it. Many of us don't, so we have to do. Finally, I would want to, I mean, as it is a short interview, but I would want to, know what is your advice to, what is your advice to the educators and parents and caregivers who are working with individuals on autism spectrum based on
Yeah.
expertise?
One of the biggest things is my biggest advice would be to use therapy that are research based, number one, because I get a lot of families and caregivers and even educators who are doing techniques, they're trying everything, and they're really doing what's in their heart, but if it's not research based, you don't know kind of what you're getting. So first advice would be to make sure that the interventions and the things that you're spending your time and your money on are research based, so that you know that there are proven outcomes. um, that's probably one of the biggest things. Also, to plan for the future is the biggest advice, because I know parents and caregivers and educators think about now, today, and what I need to teach this child today. You have to think about the next step. And that's a real big push now, especially, where I am in the States and in our state of Georgia, is, expanding adult services and what happens to kids after they leave the school system. And there's not a lot of services, but you have to start planning for that now. So you have to think about what skills and abilities and how independent does this person need to be in order to get them where they want to be, or their caregivers need them to be in the future. So it's never, never too early to start thinking about the future. I actually have a colleague of mine, Megan Timko, who started a company called Parallel, just around that whole concept of planning super, super early for what this family is going to need. You have to plan for when the caregivers are no longer there. You might even have a 4-year-old, but you have to think about the level of autism, the amount of support they're going to need, and what's going to happen, in the future. And God forbid if the caregivers are not there. So
That's
that's
one thing
probably one
keep
of the.
pushing, I guess. Pushing away, like why we have to think about it is really what the parents would do.
Yeah, and here there's a lot of wait lists for things, and believe it or not, there's years of wait lists. So you have to start thinking about it early and make a plan, and you have to surround your child with the community of people that are going to help them to get there. So that's definitely one of the other things. For educators, um, I think, again, focusing on that, having an effective mode of communication for your students is huge, but also developing a rapport with them. They're not just your students, they're part of your direct environment so many hours a day. And sometimes teachers are with students, more so than some of the caregivers, more hours a week. So really creating that rapport with the child, you will definitely get them to master more things and to communicate and to have more fun and be more independent if you create that rapport with them from the beginning. So making sure that you're utilizing all the time that you have with them as well. Um, and I think you just have to kind of play in the child's field, especially as an educator. You kind of have to be at the child's level a little bit. You have to challenge them, but you definitely have to be at their level and just play with them and have fun too. I know as a behavior analyst, you think, oh, I have to be working on this, this, and this, and I have to be collecting data on this, this, and this, and educators as well. But it's okay to just play and have rapport with kids, and to make it more of a playful environment instead of such a rigid kind of work environment.
Very, very important.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for, parting this much of, I am, I'm actually losing the word, I suppose. I'm just trying to say that whatever you said is a big learning, which we, you have gained from all this expertise, and we have to actually start doing these things if we haven't yet. Especially this part of, when you said to start planning for future. That's one very, very important part. And as well as I said, the perspective needs to change when we start working with them. Yes.
Absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for this, Heather. Thank you for giving your time once again.
Oh, thank you for having me. So good to see you again.
Same here, same here.